So this just arrived, a very lovely book all about the art of point and click adventure games by Bitmap books. It's a very lavish, large hardbound book with interviews, and here's a foreword by Gary Whitta, who started out as a game journalist and is now a big time Hollywood writer who wrote Star Wars and Rogue One. Anyway, lots of early development. You can see how simplistic some of the 8-bit graphics were and so on. And we soon get into the early Sierra games like King's Quest, King's Quest 2, Space Quest. These were great influences on me when we were first designing some of our point and click adventure games. And here's an interview with Ron Gilbert, of course famously invented the Monkey Island series for LucasArts games after they joined the bandwagon, having seen the Sierra point and click games. And he's since worked all over the place with Telltale games included. And here's some lovely early backgrounds from those games, Monkey Island 2, so on. And then we're back to Space Quest 2 here. That was a big influence on me because my first two games were point and click adventure games for Core Design, who did famously Tomb Raider, but before that they were doing arcade style 8-bit and 16-bit games before the whole 3D thing. More Space Quest and finally Indiana Jones, which were classics. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. In here's Noah Falstein, who I worked with at DreamWorks. Super nice guy. Another double spread. More lovely Monkey Island backgrounds. Great stuff. And a bit more on King's Quest. And here's Curse of Enchantia, the first game I ever worked on. Here's an interview with me and Billy Allison, who was the animator on the game. And they actually mixed this with the second game I worked on called Universe. So here are a few more backgrounds from Enchantia, and there's some from Universe, which is more of a science fiction sequel to that game. Oh, and then here's Dark Seed, a game that came out around the same time by Giga. Pretty impressive stuff. Here's an interview with Charles Cecil, who's one of the great innovators of the genre in England. Did great stuff like Broken Sword and so on. And here's some Sam and Max, lest we forget. Really cool stuff by LucasArts again, and they had another round with Telltale games later on. And here we have Beneath the Steel Sky, which is a great sci-fi game with the art by Dave Gibbons, who is one of the best comic artists working for 2000 AD and so on. Really great Blade Runner style graphic adventure. Here's another double spread from Universe, sort of an asteroid field in space. Bit of a dark reproduction in this one. And so it goes on, very extensive coverage of the whole history of development. And here's of course Grim Fandango, which has to get a mention, one of the best adventure games, I think most people would agree. And eventually we get to more recent examples of the genre, people still making these point and click graphic adventures, and of course Telltale, which did their own spin on the genre, sadly recently going out of business, but I'd worked at Telltale on their Guardians of the Galaxy and Batman games, so here's Walking Dead, so the circle is kind of complete in the end. Anyway, that is my little tour of this excellent book. Hope you enjoy checking it out. What I have here is some of the original artwork that I did for Curse of Enchantia, the first game. So I was hand painting the backgrounds. This one is watercolor, hand drawn, just pencil and on watercolor paper with an acrylic wash over it. And here's a similar one for a drop when Brad, the character, runs out of the corridor. He's kind of going sideways in the corridor, and then I took sections of this and repeated it to create a scrolling section. He runs out the door, we animate the door, and he falls animated to shrink into perspective as he falls into the water. And here are some more examples. Again, acrylic. Now I've moved on to sort of gesso primed artboard to paint these a little bit more richer. The colours needed to be saturated enough to hold up well in the game. And here's a couple more. This is where you went into see the mage, and you walked around town. This was the evil witch's castle towards the end of the game. And here's another bigger one of the witch's castle, kind of wide shot. That ended up being used as the main front end splash screen for the game. So what else we got? Oh, here is the post that I did for the game. I did the wraparound cover, as well as I hand stenciled out and airbrushed that title for the game. There you have it. And here are some that I did for the follow-up game we did called Universe. It was based on a film concept idea I had, but we adapted it heavily to be more of a sort of fantasy, comedic, light-hearted adventure game, sort of along the lines of Enchantia. And here are a few more examples of these acrylic painted backgrounds that again I scanned in and then digitized using D-Paint for the game. And here are a couple more. Last two backgrounds were Boris the character goes to another dark, scary alien planet. Here's another image that we end up using. This is a oil painting I'd already done beforehand. It's pretty big. Well, the original was bigger than this. This is actually a print. As you can see, I've featured this on my website quite a lot. As you can see, the original is pretty detailed. This was done in oil paint and touched up with acrylics and ink pens to get right in there and get all that detail. And it was my first attempt at an airbrushed nebula using a model kit airbrush, not a professional, illustrator's airbrush. Anyway, this is called the Colossus, and it's an oil painting, and it was featured in Universe, the point and click adventure game.